Welcome back to Articulate with Steve McJones. How's it going? The song you are hearing in this very moment is an original by this week's guest, Samantha Padgett. I am so freaking pumped for this episode because Samantha and I met at 2 Street, of course, obviously, and she was actually hosting when I first started. She is such an articulate person and has such an expansive vocabulary on how she chooses to convey her thought processes and means of expression through music. It's so stimulating to listen to her talk and walk us through the process. Her passion for her music really does shine through, and you can hear it not only in this conversation but also in the music. So strap in and please enjoy this week's episode of Articulate. Alright, so I think we could start maybe if you're ready.
Yeah, I'm good.
Because I'm going to ask, so you're from Virginia out there?
Yeah.
Okay. And, yeah. And you have, in Virginia, you have barbecues. Anyways.
Yeah, I know.
Limeade. It sounds really good, to be honest with you. But welcome, Samantha Padgett, to Articulate with Steve McJones. How are you doing today?
I'm doing quite well. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited. So yeah, let's get into your background a little bit. So you born, raised in Virginia, and how did you end up here?
So I was born in Hampton Roads, the 757 area. And then I ended up going to college in Charlottesville.
Okay,
and
cool.
then I stayed there for a few years. That's when I started doing comedy, etc., etc.
Yeah, Charlotte. How's the scene out there?
It's pretty weird. There's a good scene in Virginia, but it's there's these disparate hubs. So it was every Monday night in Charlottesville there was a Southern mic ran by Chris Allen, and I felt like everybody in the state, minus maybe DC, even though they're not technically in Virginia, would show up there. So people from the 757, from other parts of Central Virginia, from Richmond. Right. And then there was certain mics in Richmond that were hubs. There was a few mics in Stanton, Virginia that got decent pulls. So doing comedy in Virginia was probably the most miles I put on my car. Or anything. Really? I think it was every night of the week for the most part, with the exception of the mics on Monday. I would drive 45 minutes to an hour.
Really?
To a different city to do stand up.
That's commitment.
Yeah, but to be fair, part of it was kind of fun though, because we'd always get to carpool. So it was a full car most nights of the week.
Yeah. So
a lot of the people who I would ride to became some of my good friends.
Nice.
But I got to Philly just because one of my best friends growing up lived here, and I used to come up here and visit him. And I just, from what I saw in his life and what he was paying for rent and what was around him, he was at this very cheap ass place in West Philly.
Oh, nice.
It's this city feels very doable.
Yeah.
I always feel I talk about Philadelphia in this overly pragmatic way, where it's it's a spreadsheet city to me, where it's I love Philly, don't get me wrong, but in terms of cost of living, size of just the city itself, proximity to other locations, Philly is just right there in the perfect golden center.
Yeah.
So
spreadsheet city, I like that.
Yeah, no, it's if you crunch the numbers, at least for me, it's Philly just made sense.
Yeah. I
want to live in a big city on the East Coast, not that far away, with enough shit going on, and I can go to New York. So.
Yeah. Did you have a spreadsheet too?
No,
okay.
I don't make spreadsheets.
You just think in spreadsheets.
I honestly make a lot of spreadsheets that don't pertain to data. I just want to see things written in a grid.
Just for the aesthetic of it.
Yeah, just so I can all right, this is the red column where I write notes that are red flavored.
That's awesome. So where did the music making come in? Because it sounds in general with comedy, of course, there's creativity involved. So I wonder for you, did it start with one creative adventure, with obviously video games, you see them as creative, and then kind of how did that branch out into all the different avenues for you?
So music didn't really become that much of a thing of a creative output until college, because for the longest time I was taking instrument lessons to learn music as a skill, as a rote thing that I can do, trying to learn how to play sheet music, which I honestly really struggle with because just I can't see notes in the middle. I know how to read sheet music, but I'm practically dyslexic when it comes to it.
What did you play?
First I took piano lessons because my neighbor was a teacher, and then I learned bass, and then I learned guitar, and then I learned alto saxophone.
Wow.
And then I had a lot of friends with drum kits, so I taught myself a little bit of drums.
Okay.
And then for a specific jazz band thing, I played the marimbas.
The marimbas.
Yeah, it was for a simple song.
That's awesome. Just for one song. So.
Yeah, I don't even think we played it. It's like a thing that we did in practice a few times, and no one wanted to play that. So I was like, all right, I'll try it. Yeah. I know, piano, it's kind of similar.
Right.
I bet I played it horribly.
But that was like early in like middle school, high school area.
Yeah, like I didn't really start like thinking about like making music or that as a creative outlet until I was in college, and I took this class that was the history of just like digital electronic music. Mm-hmm. And a part of that class too had us do some like very rudimentary like music composition exercises. Basically, you just like take Audacity and apply effects and move things around in a timeline.
Okay.
And then like the whole class led up to us using Reaper, which is like a free DAW that exists online, and making a song in Reaper. And then once I did that, I was like, oh, I kind of get how this works. My friend taught me a little bit of Ableton. And then, like, as soon as it was done with that class, I turned in the final. I pirated Ableton for the first of many times. I do have a legit copy.
Yeah. But also many illegitimate copies.
Yeah. I was just like 1 to 3 is the ratio. Anyway, once I did that, I just like sat down and I banged out a track, which was like a loop of some John Frusciante song. I forgot the name of it, but there's just like a little jangly guitar part. I looped it, added some very shitty, way too loud drums. And then
That's really the key to most songs, I think, is very shitty, loud drums. As long as, there's a beat there and you get along with it, you bang your head to it, it's nice.
Well, honestly, like, I didn't know how to, like, MIDI program stuff that good then. Like, I knew how to, but, like, I was like, no, I should play this live. So if you listen to, like, any of the songs I have on my, like, first album, most of the drums, like, end up falling out of loop. Okay. Because, like, it was a thing I played myself, and it wasn't necessarily, like, locked into a measure or anything.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty cool. So, and I guess before we get too deep into, like, because I didn't even know you had how many albums do you have?
2.
Okay, 2 albums. Before we do that, so, like, just tracing back, like, the creativity a little bit, you said that wasn't until college that you explored that. The creativity before then, was comedy before that, too?
Hey, it was all kind of simultaneous.
Okay.
To be honest, at once. I really did, and at the risk of making this sound too much like a therapy session, there was, like, a lot of things I internalized growing up were the type of, like, Protestant work ethic, capitalist ideas of, like... Yeah, I know. But it's the shit, like, the only things that are really worth investing time and money in are things that are lucrative or have a monetary return. And growing up, anytime I expressed any desire to do anything creative, it was beat into my head immediately that, like, oh, you cannot survive off this. So, like, it was just, like, a passing hobby. Like, I'm a child, I'm going to want to try to write music and stuff like that. And just this weird type of discouragement I got of, like, hey, I'm making a song. I'm not saying I want to be a rock star or whatever. Like, there's no money in this. And I didn't really think about doing anything creative. I was just like, yeah, I'm going to grow up and be what my parents want me to be, etc., and be an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer or something like that. And then I got to college and I tried studying those things and I hated it so much. Yeah. And it's just when, like, I was like, okay, I can do whatever I want now. Like, once something felt so bad and nasty and I was like, oh, this sucks. I should try something else. Yeah. And that's, like, when I started making music, when I started doing comedy, which is, like, writing, sketch, and improv. And
you did sketch and improv, too?
That was what I think I just hit the tipping point of doing stand-up longer than I've done those. Okay. But up for a while, that was the majority of my comedy experience.
Sure. And so you said they all kind of started at the same time. Was it within, like, the same year that you decided to pick all that up?
Yeah, it was, like, the second half of my freshman year.
Oh, nice, nice. How, like... how much relief did you feel, like, actually trying these things out, Like, that must have been amazing for you.
Oh, I didn't even, like, really realize that at the time. It just kind of, like, I was doing... It also correlated to, and not even to go into this conversation and be, like, a lot of other podcasts, but... It correlated with, like, my first real psychedelic experiences. Nice. Particularly acid.
For sure.
That just, like, I guess bumped my train of thought into a different path.
Yeah, I feel that. I think, similarly, I guess, again, not to get too deep into it, but similarly, I had a bad psychedelic experience in college. And then from there, it, like, triggered an anxiety, I think. And then from there, I was like, all right, how do I relieve this anxiety? And that's when I started writing a lot more after that. Just to, like, for some form of creative expression, to, like, get all this in my head out onto some sort of cohesive paper or argument or something like that.
No, I understand that feeling very specifically of, like, the kind of that angst and anger that It's like, it feels like whenever I'm like angry in a bad mood and I go to work out, just to kind of like work out the anger, like that works in creative endeavors too.
Oh,
Any sort of like concerted exertion, it's like, just place this energy somewhere else.
Yeah. And what I like about creative endeavors, whether it be music or writing or something like that, is you can read it back and read it from a different emotion than you were experiencing when you wrote it. So when you come back to it, you're like, oh yeah. And it's just like, that is kind of how I was feeling in that moment. And it's like beautiful, you know?
Even when it's ugly, it's beautiful.
Yeah, that's true. But cool, so that all started at the same time. Did you see, was there overlap between the two groups, between writing, stand-up, and then the music? Or was that just two completely different hobbies that you picked up at the same time?
They're all kind of disparate, to be honest.
Okay.
There's really isn't, like, a lot of the music I'm making now, I would say, is goofy.
Oh, okay.
I would say, like, I put effort in to put, like, little jokes and stuff in the lyrics or some, like, goofy compositions, stuff like that. But
okay.
That's the closest I got to it. I know, like, they always try to find the idea of making the fucking cursed creative McGangbang of sliding all your shit together, but... Yeah, no, they're pretty much separate tracks.
Gotcha. Yeah, so that first album, it's funny, you started creating after you took the class. You didn't even make a song until after you finished the rudimentary class.
Yeah. And then, like, the first song I made after that was on my first album, and...
Nice.
It's bad, but I did it. Like, I still put it out there.
Yeah, well, that's what I was going to ask. When did you decide to, like, make an album? After that first one, you were like, ooh, nice, and then you got excited about that, or...
Well, I just, like... I don't know. I'm a very... I will, if left to my own devices, like, sit and be alone and do something repetitively over and over again.
Okay.
And I am that way with music, where I think I have, like, off of whatever I've released, and I get this is pretty standard, specifically with digital music producers who can, like, sit down and, like, make something of, like, a song in, like, a few minutes.
Okay.
I mean, I have, like, maybe like a couple hundred hours at this point. Like, I have so many loops and stuff. Like, sometimes I'll just sit down, make something, and I'll never listen to it again. But, like, when I first started, I was like, once I figured out the DAW enough, and I kind of had some creative output, I was like, wow, I have, like, a bunch of shit here. I might as well just try to make this into an album.
Yeah. And
for the first album, there's, like, really no cohesion or anything between it. They are just kind of, like, random things I did in a DAW. And, like, some songs, like most songs, I think around 1.5 minutes, while some are like 5. So
I mean, you only want 2.5 minutes if you can get it, 3 minutes max.
It's all over the place. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. But I think the background in, like, actual music, like instruments and things like that, definitely probably helped with, even though you couldn't read sheet music as well, but you were, that probably helped with putting things together and making them cohesive, right?
The big thing was jazz. I took, like, a class in jazz improvisation.
Oh, really?
And that was, like, when I felt like I finally had, like, a framework. Because, like, I played jazz band in high school, but I never played as, like, a rhythm instrument, so I wasn't really dealing as much with the chords, the chord changes, or even the key. I was, like, playing alto sax, and I was just writing each note in the, the sheet music above the note to read, to play, or just remembering, like, the intervals between the notes. So, like, I was really disconnected from, like, I guess, like, the core mechanisms of it. But once I did this jazz improvisation class where I was on keys, and then I started having to play piano for, like, entire long sessions when we went over some jazz standards, and I was just doing the rhythm, and I had to comp during the solo sections and stuff, that, like, song structure and, like, the way to arrange chords and things like that finally became a little less opaque.
Yeah.
I'm still not great at it. I really do feel like I learned music theory for, like, a period of months and it kind of just fades.
Yeah.
It's whatever, like, the opposite of riding a bike type scale of, like, I always forget it.
Yeah.
But
that's interesting.
Yeah, but that was, like, huge. And, like, also, like, once I finally got into that, like, I can kind of like read sheet music because I can read jazz chord charts so much easier because it's just like, it will be a melody and there the chords are in now, and once you know the melody, you kind of know how to, like, play the chords according to what's going on with the melody. So
yeah, definitely. Did you? Yeah, and so I mean, how long have you been? How long ago was that you started making that first album? I guess.
That was, I think I released that my sophomore and or junior year in college.
Okay.
Which would be 2016. So that's 6 or 7 years ago?
6 or 7.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so, wow. So, when you talk about hundreds of hours, it's definitely hundreds of hours if you've been doing it all since then.
Yeah.
That's funny.
I've lost like half of it too.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Pirated versions of Ableton did bite me in the ass. I would pirate a specific version and use specific plugins that I did not legally own, and then once I had a legit copy, none of these files work, and when I re-pirate it, it's like, oh, this is like a wrong version too. So,
yeah.
karma, I suppose.
Yeah, but you still got your well, you know. And so, like, so when did you come out with the second album then?
The second album was closer to graduating, and
Okay.
that one's like a complicated thing where like I was a lot more proud of that one. I put a lot more effort to make it have more of a cohesive sound.
Yeah.
So like the music I released, the name I used for all the music that I've like released is Sky Neighbor.
Okay.
Which, just a quick aside, you know that bit people do where someone says a series of words and you're like, oh, that's a band name.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just like, I told myself the last time I made that joke before I had enough to release, that was the name I was using.
Oh, really?
And I was leaning in my friend's window on like the 3rd floor of his house into his kitchen, and he called me a Sky Neighbor, and I was like, all right, there we go.
That's perfect.
But no, the second album I released, I think closer to like graduating college, was like, I think that is like the only thing I've released that is like very specifically the sound of the music I have been making under like the moniker Sky Neighbor, of like dreamy, synthy, kind of like lo-fi at points. I mean, it's not like degraded sound, but I think I use a lot of like very simple sound textures, like sound fonts from like Super Nintendo games, or like a lot of like processed, just like simple square waves. Don't really do that much with the synth. And then just like eclectic samples. That album I was like pretty proud of. It's been a lot of effort into it. There's a few tracks that are more lyrically focused, like a vocoder kind of melody carrying it through. And that, when it came to distribution, got like lost to like the digital aether. Like something fucky happened. Because one song I had a little bit of a soprano sample that I forgot.
Yeah.
And once I hit like submit, they're like, oh, hey, there's like a copyrighted material in here. You gotta remove that. So I'm like, okay, I'll just don't release that song. That's fine.
Yeah.
But like that little flag that got tripped meant that like it showed up months later on like YouTube Music, and then like a few more months later on like Apple Music and other streaming platforms, but it never got onto Spotify for whatever reason. So despite how complicated Spotify is and everyone complaining about them recently, and for good reason, they are still the default.
Yeah.
You know,
I
it's
would
like
agree.
if you're gonna order stuff online, you're not gonna not use Amazon. Like,
yeah, for
maybe
sure.
Alibaba.
Yeah, but so you're not on Spotify, but you're on everything else.
So the first album's on Spotify, but the second one, it's like the first one's called The Art Bin, and the second one's The Creativity Cabinet, and that's the one that is basically only accessible now on YouTube. So
interesting.
it's one of those like dash topic uploads.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess between the first album and the second album, is that when you took that jazz course between them, or
I took it like concurrently with the second.
with the second?
So there's like some tracks that like I released on the second album that really do have like I wrote them as like jazz standards. Like I did sit down, like, all right, here are the chords, and I would go over, record the bass line, and then basically the melodies for all these songs are just solos I did, but because it's digital audio production, I can like isolate a bit of the solo and like, oh, that's like that's the melody for this section, and then there's a more complicated version of it. It's all very piecemeal, kind of just like sonic collage bullshit.
But it sounds like there was a lot more intention than the first album, you know?
Very much so, yeah.
A lot more direction with it, too.
I mean, there's still like a few odd random tracks, because sometimes like I'll make something that doesn't fit in with anything, but I'm proud of it, so it's like, that's gotta go on there.
Yeah. And so, you're still making music since then, right?
I am. I'm actually working on an entirely new project.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So that was your last project was the end of graduation of what?
Yeah, it's like 4 years ago.
4 years ago. Okay, so then in the meantime, did you kind of just stray away from it a little bit, or just always kind of working on it a little bit in the background? Or
Well, like, that was like, after graduating was like a big chaotic period of my life, because like I got a marketing job that made me want to die in Charlottesville, and it's been a few more years. Yeah, I was doing SEO, and the job was so chaotic and miserable. It was like one of those jobs where you would, my boss would like solemnly call me into his office. It's like, come in here. And then I'd sit down, and then he's just like, you seen season 3 of Seinfeld? shit like that. He would just do random stuff like this.
What?
It terrified me. Like, I sweat through all my clothes, and like, I got like a really bad kratom addiction when I was working there. I would just like pop open like 4 or 5 pills of kratom, and I had no idea the strength or whatever. Just put them in water, chug it, and then be kind of like stoned at my desk, just like watching videos of streamers playing Slay the Spire. Like, and then like that's also like when I transitioned. Like I started transitioning around that time, and that was around the same time too as like, you know, COVID starting, and then moving to Philadelphia. So like,
just a whirlwind at that point.
Yeah, and like I had like, and I'm still kind of in that phase of like a hibernation, I guess, so to speak, where I feel like a lot more of my life became a lot more interior.
Yeah, no, I feel that.
I was only since changed since coming to Philly, and which is when I started making music again. But like for years, like I made nothing. I think I released like 3 tracks on my SoundCloud that are just kind of orphaned. They're just like things that I was making in the interim. I was like, oh, this is kind of nice. I threw it up there, and then that was it.
Yeah, and so the reason kind of, you know, moving forward with that is like, I want to, like, how do you think it's progressed? So like with your inspiration for the first one, obviously it just kind of came from that class and messing around with a lot of the samples and beats that they probably provided you at that point and what you were learning with the basics. And then the second one sounded like there was a lot more intention. So inspiration for that, like you said, sounds like it comes from, you know, video game music in the background. And
very much so.
Yeah.
That's like the only thing of all the music I've made and all the different genres, there is like a through line of like video game music. And I have a lot to say about that, because I think video game music is some of the most like meticulously composed, when it's good, music out there, because like anything that can stand the test of like repeated listening and still sound good is like awesome. And like, yeah, that's the essence of like pop music and dance music and stuff like that, anything repetitive. But like, I think video game music like deviates from that, where it's a lot more based on like setting, and it has a kind of cinematic aspect where it's kind of supposed to direct your feelings, but because video games are interactive, it's not as like direct. Like, you should feel this way. It's more of like, this is how this space sounds, and you should adjust your expectations accordingly. Like, well, there's so many like video game tracks that are like, again, like it is basically like a simple loop repeated. Right.
Well, I was just gonna real quick, is like the guy who made Zelda, he used to just like, before the game came out, would just put it on in his office all the time while he was working, just to see how annoying if he could keep it on, you know what I mean? And that's why, again, Ocarina of Time, when you talk about, you know, gameplay is fun and whatnot, but like the ambiance that they set with that, and the music and the characters and the whole...
That is like 90% of the fun, I really think. Like, that's why I go back to the game.
Right.
Is to just like, again, just like plot myself from the forest simple and just feel like I'm having a bad trip. Like, it rocks. Like, there's so many little moments where just like there's a space that like you like, and I don't know, like a lot of that is stuff I try to carry over. There's like a song I made, which it's kind of a shameful thing. I don't know if I actually released it on the album or not, or it's just on my SoundCloud, but have you ever played Eco? And/or Ico, depending on how much of a weep you are. It's spelled ICO.
ICO. No, I have not.
So that game is, I don't know the developer's name, but they also made like Shadow of the Colossus, and this game was in some ways kind of like a prequel to some degree. Like, I don't really know the lore of these games that much. I really only played this in like a stoned haze in the summer after I graduated college, but like, in this game, it's like, there's these very, like, tall and desolate, like, castle grounds. And everything casts, like, these very dramatic shadows, and it's, like, a really muted color palette, but there's these, like, really, like, cool and warm colors that kind of, like, fade in and out on the sky and on things. It has this very moody vibe. But for the most part, there's little stabs of music here and there. There's some, like, straight-up just, like, lyric-driven music, which I honestly don't care for that much, but... In the game, what you save is there's these little like stone couches that you and the princess you're escorting will just sit and like pass out on. And whenever you sit on these couches, this music bubbles up from like silence. And it is this tiny little loop. If you want to look up the song, on like, it's just called Rest. And it's from ICO. Sometimes they call it like the save couch theme. But like, it almost like it doesn't really have anything you can isolate. It's all these sounds kind of like bubbling up against, and they have this like really weird delay effect. So that creates all these weird little like chirps way in the distance, and this kind of stereo spacing thing. It's immensely gorgeous. It's like one of the prettiest things. Like, I was delivering pizzas at the time, and that job sucked, like, so bad. It was like a brand new Marco's Pizza, and they had us delivering all these free promotional things, and we weren't getting paid because no one tips for free pizza. But while I was, like, driving all around Charlottesville, at the time, I just listened to this on loop. Like, It was in my Spotify Wrapped of that year, or whatever the predecessor before it was Instagrammable.
Yeah.
Like, and it was just, like, that little scene, though, because, again, I think it's, like, a minute, like, 90 seconds of music that, even in itself, is mostly just, like, a little loop that is just looped more.
Yeah.
I listened to it for hours.
Hours and
yeah.
hours.
And it was just really impactful, like, the feeling I get of it. Like, something about it really does feel like my soul's kind of getting lifted from my body and massaged.
Yeah, resting a little bit.
Yeah,
satisfying.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. It just, I only have, played so many video games in my life, but, like, the music I've seen the Zelda Orchestra, and I think there's, like, such a, almost a nostalgia that it can emit from...
Oh, of course.
Yeah, but it's also, like, in the moment when you were playing it wasn't nostalgia, it was, like, fear, or it was, like, you were in that moment, playing, like, talking to the Zora, and there's, like, some kind of quirky music going on or something like that.
No, well, I mean, like, a lot of those games, too, really do run the full gamut of, like, genres and emotions and styles, too, which is another thing I like about video game music. It's, like, I think games are generally, longer and more varied experience than, like, a film would be. So, like, I guess, like, the amount of emotional, colors you have to paint in, there's, like, more. Like, not to be this person, but fucking Undertale's music is fantastic. I know people talk a lot about it, but that being said, though, like, that game has, like, lounge themes. It has, like, goofy waltzes. It has, like, fucking, like, chiptune metal tracks. It has everything, and they all fit for something happening in the game, but when you listen to the soundtrack, like, it goes all over the place.
Yeah.
Plus, it's composed, like, a very nice, like, I don't know, there's leitmotifs over the entire thing. It's very well done.
Yeah. And so I guess what I wanted to bring it back to is, like, I think that's kind of the point with, again, having intention in music is you want the intent for the listener to be able to feel, again, kind of that expression that you're trying to emote or, like, trying to express yourself, I guess. So I'm kind of curious, do you feel like there was a theme within the last album that had all that intention, your second album, with the expression of emotion?
Yeah. I mean, like, I would say there's, like, this, kind of, like, the vibe is, like, this radical agnosticism. I want to use, like, fancy ways of articulating it, but it's just, like, I mean, like, I was at a time where, like, I had no fucking clue who I was or what I was doing or anything, and there's this kind of, like, this void of, like, it could be anything or everything. Something, like, really big and, like, a bittersweet kind of vibe, but a little bitter. I said bittersweet and bitter. But, like, I think what I was trying to say got out there. It's just, like, I don't know, like, the video game equivalent of, like, you think you understand what the world's like, and then you discover, like, an entire new area.
Right.
And, like, there's a new theme, and it's, I don't know.
It's overwhelming, but it's also, like, kind of new and exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I guess for the new, like, your newer project that you're making right now, are you drawing from inspiration of the 4 years, or are you, like, capturing, yourself in this moment, or, how are you?
So, I mean, it's a bit of capturing myself in this moment is when I do feel like I have not going to ever say that I'm fully coalesced or cemented into anything. I really do plan on continuing to look back at myself and be embarrassed at who I am now. But it's, I finally feel, like, comfortable enough that I'm actually trying to make what I would call real music a little bit more.
Okay.
It's still, the same influences are there, but, like, I'm taking a lot more inspiration from a lot of the music I've been listening to and the type of stuff. Like, there's a lot of, like, breakcore and hyperpop kind of stuff there. Okay. Some songs are just, like, a little, like, pop punky, but that being said, like, I'm doing things that feel like these genres, but with the palette of the music I'm used to using. Like, there's, like, a song, like, and the first time, too, I've made music that is predominantly lyrically driven. Like, most of the stuff I had was majority was just, like, instrumentals with, like, a little melody or a loop or something, maybe a lyric song here or there, but even then, if there were lyrics, they were more treated as an aspect of a loop, as opposed to, like, this is actually where the song's going. Like, one of the songs that I'm pretty proud of having made is called Strip Mall Karate, and And that's the one that has more of like kind of like a pop punk feel, but in turn I try to make it kind of sound like the music for like a beat 'em up game on the Genesis, where they have like the really like chugging drums and just like that MIDI guitar that's just like da na 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 na. So like I had this song in my head, and then I went down and I downloaded sound fonts for the Sega Genesis, like the individual MIDI sounds they'll use, because I love the fucking chunky LFO sounds they have. And I went ahead and just like, you know, I had the chords, I played it on guitar, just kind of like, you know, be a normal thing, but then I used these instruments for it, and then I like processed and used like a kind of this like text-to-speech-ish filter on my vocals to give it this like kind of like video gamey robotic quality to it.
Okay.
And I think like in terms of what I'm trying to do, that is like a very clear, direct like line, I suppose. There's like, I did release a single, like I have a video for it.
Okay.
It's so like the name too for the music I'm making now is like Sentimentality Mode, which is a quote from The Sopranos.
Okay.
The whole other side, but like I there's the one song is like, again, like I had this like kind of mathy riff I was playing in the ukulele. I recorded it through a speaker, like a really cheap microphone, and then I like added some bit crush to it, and then after that, I ran it back through an amp. So it's like a very video gamey, like fucking like a Atari sounding sound, but when it goes back through the amp, it kind of blends into sounding like real instruments a little bit. Like,
really?
Yeah, it's like, you know, if you, a lot of times, like with heavy distortion, you lose so much of the original harmonics that you don't really like get the bass sound. Like you hear distorted guitar, you hear distorted guitar. You don't hear like a guitar and then something else, because it muddies it all together. Yeah, and like I made an entire song just based around that sound I made. So like... Yeah. And
that's really cool. It's like a new. I mean, it sounds like you're experimenting with the different sounds you can make too.
Yeah, there's a lot of weird things. Like I don't think there's like that many tracks that I just like. Oh, here's this synth patch I use. There's always like some sound that I have to take a little bit of a journey to discover, and then that's the scaffolding for whatever I'm doing.
Yeah. Well, that's exciting. That's really fun. Is there so there's already a single out for it? Is there a date for the album release?
There is not.
Not yet.
Yeah, no, I have the track list set up, but I'm taking my time with it because the last two albums were kind of released on this fuck it, I'm done, let's go ahead and get it out there mentality, and there are tracks that I'm like, I don't like that, or I don't know, I really struggle with like trying to make stuff, you know, perfectionist tendencies, etc., etc. We've all heard about it, but like it's really hard for me to let it go in a sense. So like I always reach a breaking point of like, fuck it, I'd rather be imperfect than have no one hear it. Right. And I'm trying to find a better balance this time around. I was initially planning on releasing it like in December, because I had like 14 tracks ready, and then I took a listen to all of them, and like 4 of the tracks like, how do I think these fit? And then I made some new music, thought maybe this will fit, and then I also decided that I'm not going to pay anybody for mastering. I'm going to try to learn how to do it myself, and that's been an entire fucking ordeal. That shit's so annoying. I spent like 3 hours trying to master a particular track, and it sounded so good on the studio speakers in the studio, and then like I brought it out, and on my phone I'm like, I only hear drums, and I was in the car, and then I only heard bass. It's just like, how is it this disparate on these different speakers? So
yeah, so there's not a certain date yet, but you're still... It sounds like so most of the songs are at least finished being composed, I guess.
For the most part. Like, yeah, I mean, there's a few songs where I'm like, I think this maybe needs another verse, or like, this is too long, or there's even like, I have a really bad habit of sometimes I have a song that's a little boring, and I pull a sample from something that I've been liking that maybe doesn't even thematically fit, and I just put it in there, like, oh, here's a version of it, and then like, now it's all rendered, I have to go in and remove that bullshit and add something actually constructive, as opposed to like a meme.
Yeah, but are there going to be memes on the album?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, like, do you know about Chris Chan? Chris Chan is a very tragic, and I would say, like, interesting and disgusting internet figure. I don't really want to get into it all this time. Sure. If you know about Chris Chan at this point, like, you're familiar with what I'm talking about, and if you don't know about Chris Chan, like, don't look them up. It's a lot of knowledge that you can just avoid and be happy in ignorance. But there is like this particular figure I've had a fascination with because she lived in Charlottesville, and a lot of the misadventures that's a really bad word to use for it now. The things that were happening were like right around where I lived. So like it was this internet legend who I've known about since like high school, who was like close to. So I did a lot of research and kept up with it. And it's a dark fascination that I think I'm a bad person for knowing all this stuff. But like there are little bits and references to, as it's called, Christery that have just kind of stuck with me that do make it into the album. Nothing too overt. There's a mention of a quote-unquote love sign, which is like a very core tenet to Christery, but I mean, maybe that's the extent of what it goes. It's a lot of stuff. It's just like, some songs are like, I have more of an idea of what I'm saying, but there's a lot of songs I have, if I'm making like a more upbeat, kind of like fun, dancier party song, you just kind of have like purely free associative, almost like schizophrenic lyrics, where it's like stuff I'm using these words for the sonic nature for them mostly, but a bit of it is like, oh, here's bits and pieces of things that are like on my mind. Like, I have like a song that has like extensive mentions of like Mas and Miatas and Dark Souls, which are things that like inhabit my head, and like stuff like, you know, like random like ARGs and creepypastas and stuff, just like one-off little references and stuff. And that's mostly for me, and that's mostly because I think the words sound nice. And if you're not into this, the whole world of, I guess, like, culture I'm drawing upon for these references, it doesn't matter. It just has this kind of like, you know, again, like freely associative, almost like schizo vibes to it, but
it sounds good. You like the way that it adds to the tracks.
I do. Yeah, no. I mean, like, in terms of just, like, something that is, like, bouncing all over the place, I feel like it should at least lyrically kind of reflect that, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I do that with plenty of my episodes in the podcast all the time. It's like, oh, this one's for me, for sure. Nobody else is listening to this.
Straight up.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that's the point of what you should be. You know, it shouldn't all be for everybody else. It should just be because you're doing it for the fun of doing it. So that's what it sounds like. And it sounds like I can tell you're really excited about this new album.
I am. I haven't made music in a few days, and this conversation is getting me rejazzed. I was kind of kicking myself for the lack of studio time. Well, that's because Elden Ring, but... Yeah.
That's a good excuse.
I think it's a fair excuse.
Yeah, absolutely.
Living in the moment.
All right, Sam. Yeah, so I think that's probably a good wrap. So is this new album going to be available on Spotify? Yeah,
it's going to be available wherever you can find it. Again, I have no album name decided as of yet, but again, the name is SentimentalityMode, and I have it linked under my Instagram if anyone wants to follow it. And again, Instagram is at Samantha I Amantha. Sam I am plus an antha. It makes it harder for people, but
that's right.
Yeah, I already have on the Instagram like a link to like an IGTV version of the song, and you can find the video I've released on SentimentalityMode on YouTube. It should be SentimentalityMode is like the artist name, and the song's called Noclip. Which if you know about Noclip?
I do not.
So in a lot of like 3D video games, there's usually like a console command, or sometimes it's a cheat code, yada yada, that allows you to just ignore geometry. So like no clipping is when like you just fly straight through like walls and things.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, it's a particular thing I love. The whole video I made for it was in Gary's mod. Okay. Which is just like the Source Engine sandbox thing. So there's a lot of it's very video gamey. Like the name for the song is a thing you do in 3D games.
Okay, and the song is called
Noclip.
Noclip. Gotcha. All right, cool. Yeah, so we'll check that out. I'll link it for this whole thing too. And yeah, appreciate it. Anything else you want to throw out there?
No, that's all I got. I mean, like again, on Instagram is where I post my show dates, and there's a lot in March. So instead of inundating you with dates right now, just check it out.
Just check it out. Yeah. All right, sounds good. Thanks for coming out. All right, how we feeling? Inspired? Are we feeling inspired? Because I feel inspired after that one. Thanks so much, Samantha, for coming out here and telling us all about your passion projects and your freaking song that gets me jacked. It's great, and thanks for introducing me to Pets Cop, Chris Chan, and City Pop. That was a fun experience. So I appreciate that. I appreciate y'all for listening, and hope everybody has a great week. Thanks so much. I love you. Amen. Okay. Bye.
Yeah, I forgot that every time I'm on a podcast, I have to dox my friend's parents' house. It's a thing I have to do. I'm legally obligated to say 850 Carlin's Way, Virginia. All right, 850 Carlin's Way, Virginia. This better remain in the episode.
Oh, it will.
All right,
will.
perfect.
Trust me.